Thank you, Nolan. It was a treat for me to work with Nolan on the Board of Regents. People often ask me how I got my job at UVU, and the quick answer is the Regents were asleep at the wheel. But I'm grateful they took a chance on me, and I've loved my role here at Utah Valley University. I'm told I have 10 minutes. I'm a Holland. Hollands can't say hello in 10 minutes. So I've got some prepared remarks to keep us on and me on time today to say a word about what I think is really some unique things that we are already doing that are part of the solution for higher education and that need to be built upon if we're going to continue to move forward successfully. The traditional university has developed over centuries. It's an astounding achievement. The modern university stands today as a sweeping collection of experts on ideas, laboratories and libraries, classrooms and course-focused activities and amenities. It also provides for the students a remarkable interval, a chance to be pushed like you've never been pushed before in an intense, extended, and rigorous academic atmosphere with broad training in many disciplines and deep training in one or two. During this interval, if you will, faculty and students also enjoy the luxury of time and space to daringly explore, test, and develop new ideas and initiatives without the worry about whether those ideas and initiatives will actually produce some immediate concrete solution to some immediate concrete problem. Ironically, this environment has spurred some of the most ingenious concrete responses and solutions the world has ever seen. And that comes on top of producing millions and millions of students with a wide range of sophisticated skills, almost impossible to develop on one's own, skills that have enormous utility for our economy, our democracy, and our own individual quests for a full, rich life. Like many people in this room, I am the grateful product of some of this country's best traditional universities. But we have a problem today. More and more businesses seem to need more and more employees with specific market-oriented skills that often are not developed as part of the myriad of majors offered at traditional universities. Furthermore, traditional universities, especially if focused on cutting-edge research, as most do, are increasingly expensive propositions. The combination of these two trends alone is putting significant pressure on our national educational system to find robust alternatives to the traditional research-focused university. Now, please, do not get me wrong. I'm not calling for a rejection of the modern research university. To the contrary, modern research universities remain key to making America prosperous, strong, and creative, producing on scale some of the world's most and best scientists, managers, and engineers. This nation and this state must be committed to developing world-class research universities. But again, given certain forces at work in the world today, there simply have to be robust and innovative alternatives that are less expensive for students and states and more responsive to immediate industry demands. As is true in so many areas right now, Utah is leading the way by providing a unique and effective set of alternatives to help address the problem. One is the rise of competency-based education. I know you've already heard today from my friend Bob Mendenhall about the great success of Western Governors U, which owes so much of its start to Utah-based leadership. They've been very successful in reaching adults in the workforce and efficiently building off of skills and knowledge these older students have already developed. You've also heard today from leaders of our community colleges and two-year colleges and applied technology centers. These still remain our lowest cost institutions that are perhaps most flexible for response to the immediate curricular needs of industry, especially at the entry level. We are fortunate to have these institutions in our state and very talented people running them. But what is especially unique about Utah's educational approach for me is the distinctive nature of what I call Utah's regional teaching universities, of which UVU is a leading example. I know Ann Milner was here earlier. I pay tribute to her. When I first arrived at UVU, she was very helpful. She'd pioneered this model at Weber State and helped me refine my own understanding of its unique role in our system. Since I know UVU best, let me take just a minute to explain what this model is. On one hand, we strive to maintain community college access. We're open admissions. Tuition, while not as low as a pure community college, is still very low compared to most other traditional universities in this nation. After becoming a university, we did not purge certificate and two-year degrees. In fact, we've expanded them. Right along the side, though, we have developed a serious teaching university with over 70 bachelor's degrees and 8 master's degrees, and a strong commitment to general education provided by PhD-trained faculty. And while we remain open admissions, we have established university standards that must be met before students can advance to upper division coursework. There are at least 4 other things that we do to make this model a highly effective response to these problems I've been talking about. One is we aggressively develop stackable credentials. These programs allow students to earn skills-based credentials in the immediate term while accumulating course credits that seamlessly fill the programmatic requirements of a more advanced degree. The programs get entry-level training done quickly while providing clear incentives to remain in school or come back to school later for higher-level degree programs that will translate to more advanced career opportunities and earning power. As an example, the Information Systems and Technology program at UVU offers the only stackable credential opportunity in the state, starting with a certificate of proficiency that was designed with heavy input from faculty and industry. These credits can then directly apply to an associate's degree in information and applied science of information technology. This associate's degree then directly fulfills the key introductory requirements for a bachelor's of science in information technology and network administration security. For the student who wishes to go beyond even that, we now have, as part of our new master's degree, a certificate in graduate training in cybersecurity, which can be applied towards a full master's of cybersecurity. I can give you examples of these: culinary arts, computer engineering, digital cinema, sales, electrical automation, robotics technology, as can the other regional teaching universities. 2, we develop these degrees in response to industry data. At UVU, the heart of our mission is student success, and we recognize that the success of our students is significantly tied to their employability in industry upon graduation. Our commitment to ensuring this success is the creation of a degree program that corresponds to industry need. For every certificate and degree UVU creates, an in-depth feasibility study is conducted by our Academic Affairs Division. They look at market demand data for given careers in Utah as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as well as Labor Insight and Burning Glass Regional Analytics. This approach ensures that UVU is responsive to student interest, but also that degrees are developed according to match industry demand in real time. In the last 5 years, this process has directed UVU to establish additional degrees in information systems, computer engineering, biotechnology, entrepreneurship, sales, personal financial planning, and applied data and analytics. And just this year, we're adding 5 new master's degrees in cybersecurity, accounting, public services, computer science, and social work. 3, we comprehensively promote pedagogies of engagement. Our engaged learning model, which stresses learning by doing and connecting and responding to current real-world activities and issues, rests on 5 distinct pillars. 1, internships. 2, global and intercultural experiences. 3, local business and civic sector projects. 4, undergraduate research and creative works. And 5, engaged learning curriculum across all disciplines. If we had time, I could give you dozens of examples of each of these in areas where UVU provides an education and promotes the practical application of classroom knowledge so as to engender highly applicable real-world skills in our students. 4th and finally, we require a strong liberal arts core. UVU's ability to respond quickly to industry does not mean that our degree programs sacrifice what over the centuries has developed as the fundamental educational core of a traditional university. Instead, the foundation of our programmatic offerings is an increasingly rigorous general education experience That includes required courses in English, math, philosophy, humanities, biology, social science, and the fine arts. These general, more traditional undergraduate courses are organized around explicitly identified essential learning outcomes. These requirements challenge students to think broadly and thematically, to make connections between varying topics, and to engage in exercises that plumb the depths of a variety of subjects rather than cursorily scratch their surface. Critical thinking and the ability to analyze the complexities of a situation is encouraged and rewarded. So is creativity and clear communication, whether that be verbal, visual, or oral. Frankly, it's the liberal arts foundation that becomes the linchpin for the long-term success of our graduates. Students' ability to see and think and act in the world not just through the lens of a particular skill, but through the set of a more holistic perspective that encompasses the great complexities of human history and modern life will make them far better contributors to industry and civil society in the long run, to say nothing of what it will do for their own individual well-being and development. This model does not solve all problems, and it works best, I'm convinced, in a system that still offers some students the premium experience and outputs of a traditional research-focused university, and for other students, the even lower cost and more flexible basic alternatives that can be found in a pure community college. But it does neatly and efficiently fill a key gap that is growing in this country, where costs for states and students alike are making the research university unattainable for some, while the increasing complexities of our global technological world make community colleges insufficient for others. We believe this is a big part of the extraordinary growth at UVU, where we are now appear to be heading over 34,000 students this fall, with a headcount projected to exceed 46,000 students by 2025. Among those students are some of the brightest and best in our region, making UVU a first-choice destination school for many. Yet it also remains to be a critically needed place of second chances for students who only after high school figured out they need the rigors of a university education. It is also of note that 36% of our students are considered first-generation college-bound students. This model is also unique on a national scale, and something the rest of the nation appears to be on its way of discovering. In closing, let me just show you briefly what I mean. In this first slide, you will see UVU positioned among the roughly 46,000 institutions of post-secondary training across the country that offer either associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees. Different colors reflect the different breakdowns of those degrees within institutions, with green showing associate's degrees, orange bachelor's, and yellow master's degrees. If we narrow our peer population to those with an enrollment above 10,000, the number drops to 579 institutions. So whatever we're doing at UVU, we're doing it on a very large scale relative to most other institutions in the nation. Narrowing still further, if we look only at public universities, we lose a few more, which takes us down to 481 institutions. At this point, if we only include those institutions that have truly stayed inclusive and accessible by remaining open admissions, the number is reduced roughly half to 224. Look at those circles. Most of them are community colleges offering only two-year degrees. Now, if we select for those institutions that have at least 10% bachelor's degrees and 10% associate's degrees, the numbers drop dramatically, and we find ourselves among 12 institutions nationally. You'll note what's happening in Florida. It's recently approved many of its community colleges to add four-year programs following what I would call the Utah model, something we've been doing for 20 or 30 years. If we increase these degree percentages to 25% in each category of bachelor's and associates, the number drops to 4 institutions, and 2 of them are here in Utah, UVU and Weber State. My prediction is that given the current growth patterns, it won't be long before Dixie joins those ranks. And of course, I can't resist showing that if we look at this slide and control for populations in excess of 30,000, there's only 1 institution left in the nation. As an institution that serves as both a teaching university and a community college, We are tremendously proud of our ability to offer relatively low-cost, high-return solution for an effectively trained workforce. UVU's graduating class is 5,300 we've produced into our local economy to serve the needs of industry and proficiency and skill. This model doesn't solve all of our problems in the state. There are many things that we need to do both as academia and industry to make this work even better, but I think it's important to note that this is a unique and singular solution in the nation, one worth celebrating today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Well done. I'm proud to be at the Weber State Institutional Council in one of those circles. We now have Dave Blake, CEO of Degreed.com. It's a learning engagement solution that helps people find, curate, share, track, and value all kinds of learning from anywhere, all in one place. We're happy to have David here. David, come on up.
Thank you. It's fun to be here. The last time I was in the room with President Holland was about 5 years ago at an event that I hosted called Hacking Education. And it's incredible to see what he has done in that time, and I'm happy to report on the progress of Degreed in that time. At the time, it was really just an idea in my head. But let me It's okay. I will go without them. Let me ask all of you a question. This is a question I've asked thousands of people now over the years. Tell me about your education. And when you ask people that question, inevitably they answer in one of three ways: where they went to school, what their degree is, or that they didn't go. And that is a reflection of this problem that has been discussed today. Said differently, we are knowledge workers in a knowledge economy, and none of you can tell me what you learned last year. If I were to ask what the degrees and the majors held by this audience, and we were to allocate the human capital in this room to the economy based on that, it would be grossly misallocated. But if I were to ask you what you learned last year and we were to allocate upon that, the trouble is that none of you can say. We have a terribly difficult time communicating our continued educational and skill attainment. And that was the mission in the heart of Degreed. Degreed's mission is to jailbreak the degree. And now, by that, we don't mean to get rid of it, but rather to make all of our learning matter. It is no longer sufficient to articulate our skills and our educational attainment with a degree that was earned in, on average in this room, likely decades ago. So Degreed was born on that insight and a second, which is important to pulling apart this problem. And that is really, why can't you tell me what you learned last year? And that's because increasingly we're learning from a diversity of sources over the entirety of our lives. And that learning really happens on islands. They are siloed islands unto themselves. I learn in my undergraduate education. I learn in my graduate education. I learn in a on-the-job training. I learn in an apprenticeship. I learn in a rotational program. I learn at conferences. We are learning here today at this event. Articles, videos, podcasts, book, MOOCs, assessments, on the job, whatever it is. But up until this point in the market, there has been nothing serving us as learners over that learning journey. And so as a learner, I travel between those islands and across those islands. I learn on campus and on the job. I learn from articles and videos and books. I learn on several websites and different platforms. And so what Degreed set out to do was to, for the first time ever, to help people answer for their lifetime of learning, and to do so in a standardized way. And that's incredibly important. There's an analogy that was given by the president of the Rhode Island School of Design, a very famous design school. He is now a venture capitalist at Kleiner Perkins. And he said, in response to a comment made by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, he said, "The day will come when there will be degree star machines." He said, if you think of the Coinstar machine, you take all of your courses, credentials, milestones, experiences. If you think of a Coinstar machine, you pour in all your change and out is spit the aggregate sum. And he said, the day will come when there will be degree star machines, where we pour in all of our courses, credentials, milestones, degrees, experiences, and out is spit the aggregate sum of our skills and educational attainment. And that is really what Degreed has set out and has built, is the ability to track all of your professional, all of your academic, and all of your informal and self-directed learning. And this is relevant to all of us, white, blue, gray, collar, because anymore, as it has been stressed repeatedly today, even fields that are traditionally seen as more blue or gray collar are increasingly dominated by technology. So as an entrepreneur, I was asked to come here as an entrepreneur, as a CEO in the state of Utah, and it has been a phenomenal journey for us. Hiring here, growing here, our office is literally the block south of here. We hired about 100 employees last year. We're now 135 employees. And what we have built at Degreed is now becoming a true reality. So in 2015, we added 1 million people to the platform, and already in the first half of 2016, we have added a second million people. Degreed is now used by all industries, and we are on track to be in about 1/3 of the Fortune 60 by the end of the year. So companies like in manufacturing, Tesla and Caterpillar, in financial services in the big banks, Bank of America and Citi, in technology, Microsoft and Intel. Degreed now is the way by which they measure in a standardized way all of the skills, all of the education, all of the learning, all of the development of their people. And what the future looks like. Today I ask you, tell me about your education, and you tell me where you went to university 15 years ago. What the future looks like is I ask, tell me about your education, and you say you're a level 7 in information security, and I tell you that I'm a level 4 in entrepreneurship and in venture capital. And it's standardized the same way that degrees are today. There are 2 types of credentials in the world, horizontal and vertical. And the degree is horizontal in that it is standardized across universities, across countries. It's accepted by all employers, and it's the same for all majors. If I tell you that I'm a JD and you tell me that you're an MD, you don't have to know about law, and I don't have to know about medicine to know our level of educational attainment. Every other credential in the entire world is a vertical credential, whether that's the CNA, the CFA, PMI, Six Sigma Black Belt, Microsoft Network Certified, MOOCs, nano degrees, new age badging, and alternative credentials, whatever it is, every other credential in the world is a vertical credential. And what Degreed has done for the 2 million people to date, for the employers on the network, is to create a standardized lingua franca for all skills. So when I tell you that I'm level 4 in venture capital and you tell me that you're level 9 in microbiology, I don't have to know about microbiology and you don't have to know about venture capital to understand our level of educational attainment. And this is true not only across skills, but it is standardized across companies. And the power that that begins to unlock is that as we, as employees, travel throughout the economy, between employers and across universities and institutions of education, that we have a standardized way to ingest and to measure all of our skills. And that is the vision of Degreed. I will leave with you, as we have gotten to work with some of the world's biggest and best companies, What can we as employers do? What can we as institutions of higher education can do? And what can we as the public and as the government do? Employers, it is no longer a command and control economy. All training used to be decided at the top, built at the top, purchased at the top, developed at the top, and then pushed down to the organizations. Training has been a command and control economy, and the world is moving too fast for that to be sustainable. We must find models that recognize and empower the development and the diversity of all of our employees. For institutions of higher education, the feast and famine model is no longer sufficient. Higher education is keen to think of itself as the culmination of your education. That might have been so in the past, but in the future, they're the preschool of your life. And if they are to avoid being relegated to that role, they must find a lifelong model that is more modular, that is stackable. And I'm very pleased to hear about the efforts by Senator Mike Lee in the proposed HERO bill. As government, we must begin to enable these new age models of educational and skill development, and getting the federal financial aid behind that is a huge part of that. Pleased to be with you. That's it. Thank you so much.
That blows my mind. That is really something. Thank you, David. I warned you when I started I was going to try and move this along very quickly. Governor Pence kind of fouled the schedule up, but other than that, and I wasn't going to make a lot of fuss about introductions, but I've got to take just a minute to talk about Carly Fiorina. I just find this story incredible when someone starts as a secretary at a real estate business, becomes an entry-level salesperson at AT&T, goes on to become a top executive at Lucent Technologies, and then ends up ending up with one of the Fortune 50 companies, and then the accomplishment, the innovation that she's accomplished during her career. And then for me, somebody who has been in the public world, to put herself out and to be willing to be a public servant or someone to take the fiery darts that come from being on the stage of public opinion. I'm very impressed with this woman, and we welcome Carly Fiorina to the stage.
Thank you for that very generous introduction, and good morning, good afternoon. I'm so delighted that Mike Lee asked me to come to the Solutions Summit here, and I have to begin, if I may, by saying a little something about Mike Lee and Sharon and their family. I knew of Mike Lee prior to running for president and then joining Ted Cruz in his campaign, but I didn't really know him. And then we spent like a long time on a bus, going from campaign stop to campaign stop. And I have to tell you, when you spend a lot of time on a bus with somebody in the midst of a high-pressure campaign, you really get to know them. And you know this, but I think so many more people around the country, certainly I among them, know this. You have a fantastic senator, a great man with a wonderful family. And while only the people of Utah can return Mike Lee to the Senate, and I know that is what the people of Utah will do, only you can return him by voting for him. The truth is that Mike Lee votes for all of us. As an American citizen, I'm very grateful to have Mike Lee's vote in the United States Senate, so thanks for sending him back. You know, I watched as my granddaughter went to college a week ago, and my younger granddaughter went back to school, and all of us who are parents or grandparents sent our kids back to school, or we're about to. And so you know that kind of bittersweet feeling you get. You know, you're proud of the milestone they've achieved, whether it's college or 4th grade. You're happy that they seem happy going off to school, but you're also a little sad because their childhood is going by so quickly, or maybe it's gone by forever. But watching our kids go off to school this fall, I thought about something else. I thought about what do you think if you're an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old? What do you think if this is your first presidential election? What do you think about our politics? Maybe you think politics is kind of like worldwide wrestling, that it's a sporting event. Or maybe you think the notion that no one is above the law is kind of quaint and old-fashioned. Certainly that's what Hillary Clinton is demonstrating to us. Or maybe if you're a House of Cards fan, how many of you are House of Cards fans? Not very many, actually. Well, you know, I started watching it, and then for me, that show kind of jumped the shark, and I thought, this is just crazy. I can't watch it. And then somebody said, no, you really need to watch it. So my husband and I just finished watching season 4, and I have a new theory. We're living through a season of House of Cards. And I think maybe if you're a 19-year-old, you think it's a reality show. I've decided that the protagonists in House of Cards are Frank and Claire Underwood, and I think they're modeled after Bill and Hillary Clinton, actually. So maybe that'll intrigue you enough to watch that show. This is a solutions summit. I, for one, ran for president among many reasons because I think we have to return to what we were intended to be, a citizen government of, by, and for the people. And I think that we owe our children and our grandchildren a reminder of what American politics is all about. And so I have to tell you, in addition to being so grateful to have an opportunity to know Mike Lee and Sharon on that bus, I'm really grateful that in this campaign season, I can point to Mike Lee and say, no, this is what our democracy is about. So thank you, Mike, for showing a great example. We're here at a Solutions Summit, the Solutions Summit. And like most of you, many of you, all of you, I've spent my life solving problems. That is what we do, actually. We solve problems in our lives or with our families. We solve problems in our communities. We solve problems in our businesses. And we get to solutions by solving those problems. And so I think it's worth at a Solutions Summit stepping back and saying, what are the fundamentals of solving a problem and getting to a solution? I think there are several fundamentals that you might recognize. Number one, I think you have to have a clear goal or objective in mind. Number two, I think you have to have a clear set of facts in front of you. You have to face reality. And number three, I think you have to have a clear set of principles upon which to design your solutions, to deal with the facts and achieve your objectives. That's what we need, right? So let's just talk about the times that we're living in, because I think the 21st century is a fundamentally different time in human history than any time that has come before it. Way back in 2001, I gave a speech for the first time in which I said that everything and anything, physical and analog, would become digital, mobile, virtual, and personal. And we are living through that time now. If you doubt the revolutionary impact of the times that we're living in, think about this. The iPhone and all of its copied devices from other manufacturers around the world. The iPhone was first introduced, I mean, let's face it, we all live in our devices now. It was first introduced in 2007, less than a decade ago. And yet, today, virtually everyone is tethered to a smart device that allows them to communicate with anyone, anywhere, on any subject, anytime, to know anything. what's true and what's not true. In other words, this device that is less than a decade old gives an individual unbelievable power. But it also means that the 21st century is the most globally competitive century in human history. Money can go anywhere, jobs can go anywhere, headquarters can go anywhere. That's a reality. And people can go anywhere too, and so can ideas. So I think we have to think about, as we are solving problems and coming up with solutions, what is the objective in a time as unique as this? Because there has never been a time in human history, and by the way, I was a history major, I studied history, but there's never been a time in human history when borders were so permeable and individuals were so potentially empowered, where money and people and talent and ideas can go anywhere and do. I think the objectives we need to have are, well, let me back up for a moment and say, in this unique 21st century, what is the single most important asset that we have? It's called human potential. Whether it's in a family or a community or a business or a nation. The coin of the realm now is IQ, talent, muscle, heart, human potential. The family, the company, the community, the state, the nation that taps its human potential is the nation, the community, the state that wins. And so our objectives need to be to unlock and unleash as much of our human potential as possible in every community, in every state, and across this nation. I think our principles are sort of equally clear. At least they've been clear in my experience. My first principle, when I think about any solution, and I have thought this ever since I got into business, because it's come true in every experience I've ever had. People sometimes ask me, how did you go from secretary to CEO? I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan. I achieved far more than I ever dreamed of. But what I learned was that every time I encountered a problem, there were people who knew how to solve the problem. It's just they frequently had never been asked. And so I would solve problems by enlisting other people's human potential, their brain power, their heart for solving the problem. And we solve problems. So I think one of our objectives needs to be we must unleash and unlock the maximum amount of human potential in our nation. Because you see, when all of us can unleash our potential, then all of us are better off. We know that. We can solve more problems, we can face more opportunities, we can innovate more, we can achieve more. So one of our objectives has to be to unlock human potential, and one of our principles has to be, and I have learned this over and over as well, everybody has far more potential than they realize. Everyone has far more potential than they realize. Their circumstances don't dictate their potential. The desperation of the problem doesn't dictate their potential. Everyone has far more potential than they realize. Here's the second principle I've learned to apply in every problem I've ever solved. If you concentrate power for too long in too few hands, you're going to make problems worse, not better. Bureaucracies are all the same, folks. I've been around big bureaucracies my entire career, and big bureaucracies are all the same. When you have a big bureaucracy where everything is concentrated, where process and money dictate the outcome, not common sense and innovation, what happens? Every bureaucracy, I don't care if it's a company or a charity or a government agency, every single bureaucracy ends up doing the same thing. They turn in on themselves. They forget who they are there to serve. And they do whatever is necessary to preserve their power, their money, their status quo. It's just the nature of a bureaucracy. So the principle that I have always used in solving every problem is power, money, decision-making has to be dispersed and placed as close to the problem as possible. Because if it's close to the problem, it'll be accountable for the solution. And the objective as well is to unlock as much human potential as possible. Now, you know, those two principles might sound vaguely familiar. Let's unlock people's potential. Let's make sure we don't concentrate power and money in big bureaucracies. They might sound vaguely familiar because actually they are the principles at the heart of our Constitution. When our founders said everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what they were talking about was people have a right to fulfill their potential, to find their own way. And of course, the most radical idea that our founders put forward at that time, and it's visionary still, is that the right to fulfill your potential comes from God. And it shouldn't be taken away by man or government or bureaucracy. And the second thing that our founders understood, because they too were students of history and they had seen abuse of power close up, the second thing our founders understood is if you concentrate decision-making and power and money into too few people's hands or big, ponderous bureaucracies, you're going to crush human potential. And so they believed in a separation of powers. And the Constitution is very clear, just like every business manager should be. You know what? Headquarters, in their view, Washington, D.C., the federal government, the bureaucracies, headquarters only get to do certain things. And the things we don't say they can do, they don't get to do. Families get to make those choices, or communities get to make those choices, or states get to make those choices. I can tell you, as a business executive trying to solve problems, the first thing I would ask is, why is this decision being made in headquarters? Why is it that people way far away from the customer or the supplier or the problem are deciding something that the people closest to the problem actually probably know how to solve? They've just never been given the opportunity to use their potential and solve it. Now, I also said that when we think of solutions, we have to have a clear objective. For me, the objective of any company, of any family, of any community, and of any state or nation, the objective needs to be to unlock as much human potential as possible and unleash that human potential in pursuit of solving problems and pursuing opportunities. I said that to solve problems, you need fundamental principles, and I have two. Everyone has more potential than they realize, and potential is not determined by circumstances. And the second principle I said is that centralized power is always abused power, and you got to decentralize power and money and decision-making and control and put it in the hands of people who are closest to the problem, because they will solve the problem. But I also said that you have to have a clear set of facts. And so let's talk clearly about the facts of our nation. The facts of our nation, as Governor Pence talked about eloquently, the facts of our nation are we are not educating and preparing too many of our children and workers and young people for the 21st century. So in other words, we are wasting vast amounts of human potential. That's dumb. It's not just wrong. It's dumb for us as a nation. We're cutting off our nose to spite our face. And those like Democrats who would defend a failing system for political purposes are actually holding our nation, not to mention those families, back. What else do we know about facts if we're clear-eyed? We're trillions of dollars in debt with vast bureaucracies that don't perform. In fact, 80% of the American people now say, Gallup has been asking this question for decades, it's at an all-time high. 80% of the American people say the federal government is incompetent, corrupt, and our problems are festering. 80%, folks, that means it's Democrats, it's independents, it's Republicans, young, old men, women. In other words, we know this isn't working. Just like any business executive knows when you've got tons of money and power concentrated in the hands of people who are no longer responsive and don't understand the problems they're trying to solve, you're going to get the wrong result. And that's what we have now. It's not just that the impenetrable complexity of the regulations that have been created, but that impenetrable complexity does what? It favors large bureaucracies, so it favors a company like Hewlett-Packard and makes it hard for an entrepreneur like our wonderful previous speaker. And that's why you see in this nation that's defined entrepreneurialism, that's why you see, for the first time in U.S. history, you see more small businesses failing than being started. The truth is the track record of entrepreneurialism in this country is not as strong as it once was and is not as strong as it needs to be for us to lift people out of poverty and put people back to work. And that's why we have record numbers of men out of work, record numbers of women living in poverty, and record numbers of unemployed youth. The system isn't working. And that's why people are frustrated. Obviously, they're frustrated. Everyone has more potential than they realize. Power concentrated is power abused and problems left to fester. Bureaucracies turn in on themselves. And if we want to lift families and communities and states and this nation up, we must ensure not only that we hold our government accountable, but that we begin to break down these enormous concentrations of power. It's the only way we're going to solve our problems. In a way, I believe that each of us as citizens have to participate in solving this problem. It is easy to leave politics to politicians or those who would run for office. But I think a government of, by, and for the people means that we as citizens have to get engaged, have to stay engaged, and have to help solve this problem. I want to tell you a little story from a long way away, because sometimes when I say everyone has more potential than they realize, the goal, the objective of every company, of our public policy, of our state policy, the goal and objective should be to unlock and unleash as much human potential as possible. Sometimes people think that's kind of airy-fairy. So let me tell you a story. Before I ran for president, I was the chairman of two major charities in this country, and one of them is called Opportunity International. Opportunity International is a Christian-based microfinance organization. Microfinance is the process of loaning extremely small amounts of money to extremely poor people. Opportunity International happens to be the largest microfinance lender in the world. We have lent $8 billion, $100 at a time, and we have lifted millions of people out of poverty. 93% of our clients around the world are women. And so in January of 2015, I traveled to India. I was in New Delhi. I was holding a global board meeting. But at the end of that global board meeting, I wanted to meet with some of our clients, and so I traveled to the slums. Now, I don't know how many of you have been in the slums of New Delhi, but they're pretty desperate places. Mountains of trash, marauding animals, sewage in the street, people piled on top of each other. And as I was climbing a rickety ladder to get up to the rooftop of a building to sit down with 10 of our clients, I must tell you, steeling myself, because I expected to see in our clients' eyes the desperation of the circumstances that I saw all around me. But when I sat down with these clients, 10 women, I did not see desperation. I saw focus, determination, pride. I saw hope. They talked to me about the businesses they had built. They talked to me about the people they had employed, in many cases their own families. They talked to me about the life they were building, and it was a life of dignity and purpose and meaning for them. And that is what we all want, a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. As I traveled across the country, I contrasted often the look that I saw in those women's eyes whose potential was not determined by their circumstances, who, yes, needed someone to take a chance on them. We all do. Yes, they needed a helping hand. We all do. But I contrasted the look that I saw in their eyes with the look that I saw in too many veterans' eyes. Strong fighting men who would come up to me with tears in their eyes and tell me that they felt powerless to navigate the bureaucracy of a VA that seemed no longer to care for them. or the look I saw in coal miners' eyes or farm workers' eyes whose ability to work literally is being taken away from them by their own government. Or the look I saw in a single mom's eyes with 2 kids who desperately wanted to build that life of dignity and purpose and meaning for herself and her children, and instead she found herself tangled up in the webs of dependence that we have built through these federal programs for decades. We've spent trillions of dollars on poverty alleviation, and yet more people are living in poverty. And I can tell you that when you want to build a better life, you don't need somebody saying to you, you can't do that, we'll take care of you. What you need instead is someone to say, yes, you have human potential. Yes, you have the opportunity to build the life you want. We will give you a helping hand. We will take a chance on you. We will make sure you have tools and training and support, just as we would any employee in our businesses. But we know that you will make the best choices for yourself and your family, and we know that you have the capacity to go beyond your circumstances. I saw hope in those women's eyes in India, and I have seen hopelessness in too many Americans' eyes. And I have seen women who had a stake in their future, and there are too many people now who feel they have no stake in their future. And I saw a look of power in those women's eyes. They felt in control and empowered in their own lives, despite their circumstances. And there are too many people in this nation who feel powerless, not because they don't have human potential, but because they cannot see a way to get beyond their circumstances, and because so much of what our government does to do today keeps them down instead of lifting them up. Everyone has more potential than they realize. And we will not unlock the potential of this nation until and unless we learn that money, power, decision-making, control have to go to families, communities, and states, and out of vast, unaccountable bureaucracies. I want to tell you one other story. You see, my dad, I grew up in a conservative family, but I didn't really understand what my dad was trying to tell me about the value of conservative principles until I went to work in the business world. And then I saw that they just work better. It works better to give people closest to the problem the responsibility to solve the problem. It works better to disperse money in decision-making instead of concentrating it. It works better to assume that people actually do have the potential to solve a problem and to capitalize on an opportunity instead of assuming they can't or they won't. I went on The View in the course of my presidential campaign. And, you know, The View isn't exactly where Republican candidates go on a regular basis, but I actually think to solve the problems of our nation, we have to spend time talking to people who don't yet know they agree with us. And so I went on The View. And as I sat with the 5 hostesses of The View, all interesting, lovely women, one of the hostesses said to me, Rosie Perez, we were talking about Vladimir Putin. And she was sort of fascinated that I had had a meeting with him, and what did I think? And all of a sudden she stops herself and she says, wow, Carly, I really like you. She sounded kind of shocked. She said, I'm not a Republican, you know. I said, wow, Rosie, I'm surprised to hear this. And then she said, why are you? Why are you? And I said, Rosie, I'm a conservative because I know our principles work better. Our principles work better to lift people up. Our principles work better to solve problems. Our principles bring solutions. And the principles I had in mind was everyone has more potential than they realize, and power concentrated is power abused. And then I went on and I said, you know, Rosie, I always think of the head of the Chicago Public Teachers Union, who took to the microphones in the middle of a teacher's strike. And the issue in the strike was teacher accountability in the classroom. And the head of the teachers union strode to the microphones and said this. She said, we cannot be held accountable for the performance of students in our classroom because too many of them are poor and come from broken families. Now, what was she saying? That if you're poor and you come from a broken family, you can't learn and we can't teach you. That is not what America is all about. And in fact, I have seen over and over and over in all kinds of parts of the world, everyone can learn. Everyone has enormous potential. But you see, progressives believe that some are better than others. And therefore, some need to take care of others and some have to decide for others. That is not what this nation is all about. You know, in that very gracious introduction, you heard that I started out as a secretary. I typed for a 9-person real estate firm in the middle of a recession. I had no ambition to become a CEO. But I can tell you with absolute certainty, having traveled and lived and worked all over the world, that it is only in the United States of America that a young woman can start out the way I did and go on one day to become the chief executive officer of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible here. And so as we focus here in Utah on solutions for our communities, solutions for our families, solutions for our businesses, solutions for our state, let us remember what works. And what works is this. It has always worked, and it is why our founders wrote the Constitution. What works is to recognize that everyone has potential far more than they realize, and that power concentrated is power abused. And to solve problems, we must release power, money, decision-making, and authority so that it is closest to the problem that needs to be solved. Those things are as true today as the day they were written. In September, we're now in the month of September, and I'll close with this. In September, George Washington gave his farewell address to the nation. And in that farewell address, he warned us about the rise of political parties. He said, political parties are good things, but sometimes political parties get so focused on winning that they forget about governing, and they forget about principles. Whatever party the American people are, the American people have reached common ground. 80% of us know that this isn't working, and that too much money and too much power are focused and concentrated in one place, and that our problems are festering. Lincoln, in his Gettysburg Address, stood on a blood-soaked battlefield and begged his fellow citizens. He begged them to fight, not necessarily physically and literally, but to fight for the principle. In fact, he said, fight so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. I got involved in politics because I decided you can't leave politics to the politicians, and even if you want to leave it alone, it will come and find you. And I believe that citizens have an extraordinary power and responsibility in this unique human century. We, as citizens of this great nation, must stand for the principles that we know will work to solve our nation's problems. And so as citizens of this great state and citizens of this great nation, as you focus on solutions for problems, not just here in Utah, but all across our nation, not just for your businesses, but for our families and our communities as well, I ask you to think about two of the most powerful symbols of our nation's democracy, things that remind us of our responsibilities as citizens. Lady Liberty is one and Lady Justice is the other. Lady Liberty, think about her. She stands tall and strong, as America must always be, and we cannot be tall and strong unless every single American has an opportunity to fulfill their potential. She's clear-eyed and resolute. She doesn't shield her eyes from problems or evils. And she faces out into the world because she knows, as an exceptional nation, we must lead in an exceptional way. And her torch is always high because she also knows that as the most unique, exceptional nation on the face of the earth, that we are a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. And that is true. Lady Justice holds a sword because she's a fighter. She's a warrior, as I believe we as citizens must be, for the values and the principles that have made this nation and our communities and our states great. She holds a scale, And with that scale, I think she reminds us that all of us are equal in the eyes of God. And so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike, and that is most decidedly not where we are today in our nation. And most importantly of all, perhaps she wears a blindfold. And I think with that blindfold, she is reminding us that it must be true that in our communities, in our businesses, in our states, in our nation, in this century, it cannot matter who you are, or what you look like, or how you start, or what your circumstances. Here, every American must have the opportunity to find and use all of their God-given gifts to fulfill their potential, because when each of us can do that, all of us are better. And we must be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. I hope you stay involved. Please do. Please do. What a great address, and what a good, well done. I just am very impressed with her background, and now with her having a chance to meet her. Prior to welcoming Senator Lee back to conclude the event, I want to remind you that the food trucks listed are up on the plaza, and you're welcome to use your ticket to get your lunch. Let me say, just in conclusion, I concluded that the moderator ought to be not seen, but I've been very impressed by what's happened here today. I wish there was more people here to be able to hear what we've heard and to be able to participate. My compliments to Senator Lee's staff for putting on a great program, and to Senator Lee. And now, Mike.
I will be brief, especially because I know that I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch. Just in closing very quickly, first of all, I want to thank you, Nolan Karras, for being our MC today. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you. I also want to thank every one of our speakers and our panelists and our moderators and all who have participated in this event. We've had an outstanding set of presentations today. Let's give them a round of applause for speaking today. One of the reasons why I was so excited about this event was that this gives us the opportunity to show off what I sometimes refer to as the Utah model, the way we like to do things in Utah, where we bring people together, even people who don't always agree on everything, and we discuss. We say, let's talk. And we come up with ideas, and those ideas often lead to better solutions for everyone. This is the Utah model. We've been able to show that off to some of our fellow Utahns, and also to show them off to some people from outside of our state who have given us their own wonderful perspective. My big hope for today is that when we leave, we think of this event frequently with an eye toward finding solutions, and that we ask ourselves a couple of questions. Number one, am I looking only to preserve the status quo, or am I opening to change the status quo? And number two, if and when I find a solution, a proposal for changing the status quo, who benefits? Who would benefit from that? In this context, when we're talking about education, if the answer to that second question is anything other than students and workers, then we should go back to the drawing board, perhaps starting with question one. But together, if we ask these questions, and if we continue to incorporate the principles, including a lot of the wonderful principles Carly Fiorina just shared with us, principles about how we shouldn't allow too much power to be concentrated in the hands of the few, we will find better solutions. And a lot of those solutions can originate right here in Utah, where people care deeply about education, where people care deeply about good government, and where people understand intuitively that what has served us well in the past is following the original understanding by our founding fathers about how our government is supposed to be set up, and allow the people to govern themselves at the most local level possible. I want to thank all of you, finally, for being here and for participating in this great event, and I look forward in seeing what we can achieve together. Thank you very much.